record on the computer. So, hello everybody, good morning. So what I have open here is where we left off with lesson 5, but I didn't open lesson 5. I'm actually, my root folder is linked to lesson 6. So this is where they start off in lesson 6 is where we left off in lesson 5. Okay, is that clear to everybody? So how you do that? And remember, I said for every lesson that we do, you need to go to your, let me click in here. There we go. You go up to site and we manage sites. And here's the one that I have now for, Art 196 Fall 2020. This is on my computer. This is local. So for every lesson that you do, you have to double click on here and you need to change the location of the root folder. Now, the root folder for lesson 5 was the folder in lesson 5, and now it should be, I should have changed it to lesson 6. Okay, and that's what you need to do. You need to change it to lesson 6. And the HTML file that they provide, which is kind of grayed out here, it says my layout 8.html, is where we left off in lesson 5. So I don't want you to load your own HTML file that you created in lesson 5. Use the one that's inside the lesson folder. And then in addition to that, remember that you need to go under an advanced, and under local info, you need to select for the image folder, the one that's located inside the lesson that you're working on. In this case, it will be inside lesson 6. So this is the root folder for lesson 6. I'm going to select the image folder inside lesson 6. And then when I'm done, I can save it all. And then when I go back to files, this is what I should see in here. And there's several folders that we really are there that we are using that kind of sit in the background. That here is the CSS folder. This is Bootstrap CSS, and just by the mere fact that we generated this basic structure that we're using to build our content, it uses Bootstrap CSS. So that's there in the background, and it's linked to this file. The same stands for fonts. And again, because images lie outside of the document and need to be linked, these are the images that we're going to use that are contained inside the folder. Okay. So we got two. We got an image of a fern and a stripe. Now, I don't know that we'll be able to complete lesson 6 today. It's probably one of the largest and most robust. Actually, the next several lessons are going to be some of the biggest. Okay. The other ones go pretty quickly. This one does not. And then also the last folder here is JavaScript. And again, there's, Bootstrap JavaScript and that sort of thing that's built into this that we don't want to touch. Is that clear to everybody? Does anybody have any questions about that? Because this is where we're going to get started. And the first thing that we're going to do, and you typically, the way pages load and the way we're going to build this page is that generally we build the basic framework, and that's what we did in lesson 5. And so that's what we're starting with lesson 6. And these are called divs or divisions, or they're basically containers to hold certain elements, or, of our web page, and to control, how they are displayed. We will develop, a style sheet for that, and individual selectors for those that control how they're, how they're viewed and how visible they are. Okay, and just like the way pages are loaded in your browser, they typically load from top to bottom and from left to right. So that's how a page loads in your browser. So we're going to build the page from top to bottom, from left to right, and that's how that's going to work. So the very top div that we have here, by clicking here, and this is sort of an essential that you'd be able to do that. And you can do that from just clicking on the screen here. And you'll notice that when I click inside it, I can actually add text in here. If I click on the little blue thing that says div, notice that instead of being highlighted in orange, it's highlighted in blue now. And now I have this internal, it's a div that's inside the row that we created. And it was the column small 12 units. Okay, now before we can introduce over here in our insert tab, what we're going to insert now is we're going to insert a nav bar. Make sure that you have Bootstrap components selected here. And what we want is to insert down here a basic nav bar. But before we do, we need to get rid of this div. So oftentimes when you add Bootstrap elements, it adds, for better or for worse, it adds more oftentimes than what you actually need. And so we're going to proceed by introducing a new nav bar, and we're going to then go ahead, and because we don't need all of the components that are a part of that nav bar, we're going to go ahead and we're going to delete some, and then we're going to add some. But it gives us the basic structure to work with. And that's probably, from my perspective, that's the best way to go. To build this nav bar from scratch would be overwhelming. Okay. So the way that you can select these is that I can click here, down here in the tag selector down here in the lower left-hand corner, and you'll notice that when I click here, it says column small 12. There's that div. That's one way of selecting it. I can also select it from over here in the right in the DOM. So I can click on here and it's selected. Notice that if I want to select the row because this div is nested inside that row, if I click on that, now notice that it's selected instead. So I want to select that column. Okay. And it's a single column, remember. And before we introduce the nav bar, we need to get rid of that because the nav bar actually is self-contained. And this will only cause styling issues when we're done. And you'll notice that if you forget to do that, and I have forgotten to do that in the past, that after a while, something doesn't look quite right and you need to go back and remove it. And if I move this bottom, and I'm always working in split view, that's my way of working, it's kind of the way of choice. Notice that I can select that div from here as well. I can just click in here and get rid of that. So with that selected like that, all I have to do is hit the delete key and boom, it's gone. And I'm good to go. Now I can go ahead and I can add that div, or that, not div, I can go ahead and under insert Bootstrap elements, I can go in the nav bar. And I just want to add a basic nav bar. Okay. So I have basic selected. I'm going to go ahead and click on here. And what I want to do is I want it nested. So remember, you have these 4 different options. When you insert an element, it can be nested within an element. And that's what I want this time. I want it to be inside that row. I can have it be wrapped around it, or I can have it inserted before or after. And so these are really critical as to where this is going to be inserted. And I want it nested. Okay. And you'll see that it says current Bootstrap, da-da-da-da-da. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And yes, I'm good to go. And there you go. You'll notice we have a very kind of generic looking nav bar that's nested inside that first row. It's dark gray type, light gray background, and also white background. And if you wanted to leave it as is, you could, but we're going to style it to make it look a little bit, enhance it visually a little bit. But we don't need all of these elements. So the next step in here, and I need to go to use my book myself to make sure that I'm you know, doing this in the right order, because if I forget, it's easy to get messed up. So we don't need the drop-down menu to the right. We don't need this link. We don't need the submit button or the search. We will add a drop-down menu in a later lesson. And normally I would leave this here if I knew that I wanted a drop-down menu, but they want to show you how to do it manually. And it does get, that's what I'm saying, complicated and can be easily, you know, screwed up. We're going to get rid of the brand. We're going to add links to this, and then we're going to center them, and we're going to style them to make them, you know, look like our, you know, what we want. So we're starting with a basic kernel of what works for us, that if I go ahead and I scrunch this down, you can see that it already conforms to a responsive website, that I get the little hamburger symbol in the upper right-hand corner, that if this were viewed on a smartphone, that it would, you know, you click on it and you could get your menu from there. To add that manually is really kind of a pain. So it's really, I think it's much better to work from these Bootstrap components. Bootstrap is pretty well an accepted kind of norm these days in web design. And I think it was developed by the developers at Twitter, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but anyway, they wanted to develop a system by which websites would work well responsively, you know, no matter what size screen it was worked on. Anyway, to get going with this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select this element here. Now, if I want, I can also come down here. That's the drop-down toggle, but I also want to select the more comprehensive drop-down itself. So not just the toggle, but the whole thing. And again, I can do that. Let me move this up a little bit. I can do that from the DOM as well, but I'm going to do that from here. And if I move even further over, I can select that. Now, I don't want that. So that would be deleting too much. I'd be deleting the whole thing. So now if I click here, I can go back. So I'm going to select the link and the drop down both. Okay. And then I just, with both of them selected, I'm going to go ahead and hit delete, and it's gone. And we need to check in here to make sure that I'm not removing elements that I don't want to be removed. And so far, so good. The next is that you'll notice if I click the submit area here, okay, this is the button for the submit. Well, I also want the form to be deleted as well down here. That's what a submit button or submit elements are, is that they are part of a form. And you can see that I have the opening and closing tag that's selected here, and I selected that from the bottom selector button down here. I could have also selected it from the DOM over here. To click and select them on the screen sometimes is a little bit difficult, so you have these 3 different locations, actually 4 if you want to select directly from the code to get rid of them. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to also get rid of the drop down, but as I said, we're going to actually do that later. Now you'll notice that this is the drop down toggle that's selected. I want the entire drop down itself to be removed. And I click like so. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to start to add some of my own elements. So I'm going to check here, make sure that I'm doing it in the right order here. Get rid of the drop down. I guess I'll get rid of the brand as well. Let's go ahead and do that. I forgot doing that. So I have that brand navigation right there. I need to get rid of that. So I'm just left with these 2 links. So the first thing that they want us to do is we're going to, and I'm going to do it a little bit differently than the book, but what we're going to do is I'm going to double click on here. And I can either change it from up here in live view, or I can click it down here in the the code view. And instead of link down here, just kind of a generic word for link, they want us to put, is it home? Is that where we start here? Yeah, we want home. That's usually the first link that you have. And notice that it changes up here in live view. So that's the first one that we're going to change. And then we're also going to add additional links. But I'm also going to change the name of this link as well. So I can change it from here, or I can come back in here. Let's go back in here again. There we go. Make sure that that one is selected. And again, when it's selected inside there and highlighted, I can come down here to code view and I can highlight it. When I do it in code view, I know that it's going to work properly. So the next one that we're going to add here is green news. There we go. So we've added that. So we have two of the links for what ultimately will become a robust website with multiple pages. Right now, we don't have those pages. We're preparing in advance and knowing that we are going to have those, and we can always add more links and more pages. But they pretty much have it worked out. And I think you should too, when you're building from scratch. You should probably create a map for yourself, knowing that I have a home page. And then what additional pages do you have at the moment? And you might want to also allow for additional pages to be developed so that it's kind of like a flow chart. And you may have noticed in lesson 4, if you were looking at that they kind of scratched out on a napkin. Well, what I chose to do, and if you look down here, you can see that this nav bar is contained in an unordered list. These elements of that nav bar contained in an unordered list. So I can click here, and I can add more, but instead what I'm going to do, what I like to do, is I like to take, if I already have an element here, I can go ahead and I can copy that, and then I can go ahead and right after the closing tag of that unordered list item, I can go ahead and hit paste. Now I have 2 green news. And if I'm going to do that again, if I'm going to add multiples, I just go back and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste several times. Okay. And now all I have to do is I have to go back in and where it says green news, I just need to change the names and I'm done. So it's a little bit different than the book, but it's, I will show you a gotcha in here in a minute. So we want green news, then we want green events. Okay, so I'm changing that. Whoops, the wrong one. I need to change it up here. There we go. But it's easy enough to change in code view. And what's the next one that we have to do? We want green news, green events, green travel. Yeah, so I'm going to go back in here, and the next one is going to be green travel. Make sure I spell it correctly. I'm known for making typos. And then we have another one. We have green tips. Again, these are all future pages that we're going to create. And these links don't go to anywhere at the moment, so it really doesn't matter. Then we want contact us and about us. So I'm going to go ahead and select contact us, create contact us. Whoops. Contact us, and I got to decide to make one more copy here of this. Make a copy of it, and then hit write, and hit return, and then paste, and then about us. Okay, about us will be the last one. About us. And there you have it. We have, placeholder for all of our links. Now, before we want to continue, you'll notice that the home is, there's a few things that we need to clean up the code. And the home is highlighted on kind of like a dark gray. And there are various ways that you can control these links. And in our particular case, we're going to get rid of that. So there's a few things that we need to clean up here. We need to get rid of class active. So I need to go in here and with this, and let's click on here for a minute, see where I'm located here. Make sure that I'm in, there we go. So this can only be done now from code view. So what I want to do is, you'll notice under the first item where it says class active, that could be one of the settings that you use, that anytime you're on a page, then that link looks decidedly different from the others. Because our website is so small, you really don't need that. You kind of know where you're at. But what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of that right now. So I'm going to get rid of that here. And I get that from the left to the right bracket here. Get rid of that. And there you go. Okay, now I got rid of too much. I didn't want to do that. So I got rid of a bracket that I don't want. Okay, so let's class again, all the way up to that bracket. Now get rid of it. There you go. Now it works. Now notice that that gray background is gone. Okay, so that's one of the things that we need to get rid of. The other is that there's a span tag up here that we need to get rid of. So that's the closing tag for that class icon. But what I need to get rid of is right here where it says span class icon bar. No, that's not it. Hold on here. I got to make sure that I got the right one. I want after home. Let's go back down here to home. I'm in the wrong place. No, I'm sorry. Wrong place. Leave all these alone. I need to get rid of the span tag that's right after home. So this one right here. Here we go, all the way to here. Let's see how that works. Okay, that should do it. You should be okay. And I don't know that we need the word current either. So that, I haven't removed all that span tag. So we need current, and we need all of this gone. There we go. That's the end of the span tag. So there we're good to go. So that's the cleanup of that. And now it's a good time to save it. So we've started with a basic nav bar. We've eliminated elements that we don't need, and we've cleaned up the code just a little bit. So let's make sure that I have this all working right. So I'm going to go to File and Save As, and I'm going to name it as my layout, but to differentiate it from the previous one, I'm going to name it Working File. In case I screw up, I can always go back. And I can also name them Working File 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, because there's always that case, the case that you screw up and you need to be able to backtrack and to be able to troubleshoot what you're doing. So now we're going to dress this up a bit. We're going to change the background colors. We're going to make each of these buttons look, the links look a little bit more attractive so that they look like actual buttons that you would see on something. So what we're going to do is now we're going to get into CSS development here. So we're going to switch from the Insert tab to CSS. And you can see that that we already have Bootstrap CSS, and this is what you want. It needs to be read-only. You don't tinker with the Bootstrap CSS. It's too complex, too convoluted. And if you do change one thing, it could have repercussions for all sorts of other stuff. You don't want it to change, okay? So what we're going to do now is we need to go and we need to create our own style sheet that we're going to write and use in addition to this. So I want to make sure that I have all, selectors here. If I look at CSS Designer and I have all selected, all sources, so that includes Bootstrap and all the ones that we're looking at here. And there's a whole bunch of rules here refer to Bootstrap. And they're here, and you don't want to get rid of them, even though you may not need some. Okay, so those are all the sources. So what we want to do, though, is we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a new source. We can also, if we want, if you look at if we click on media queries here, you'll notice that they have for a really small screen, they have something called LEAD or LED source. And if I say show set, it will show you, and the only thing that it does here, and it's grayed out because you can't edit it, but if you look at it, it shows you that the font size on a really small screen will change to 21 point, okay? Or 21 pixels, I should say, not point, 21 pixels. So later on in lesson 7, we are going to add 1 or 2 of our own media queries. And when we do, when you resize the screen, you'll be able to see the changes and make sure that they work appropriately for the screen size that it's being viewed on. So I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to select all sources again. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and we're going to add our own. So what I want to do is I'm going to just under sources here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a brand new one here. And I don't have an existing one. I mean, if you did, you could attach it. But I'm going to create a new CSS file. And I'm just going to try to use what they want us to. This is going to be called green styles. .css. And I want it to link. I don't want to import it. If you recall the other day, one of my lectures, I said the way that you can insert, that you can link style, or just that you can, there's 3 different ways that you can control styles or CSS. They can be embedded inside the code itself, which is not recommended. You can also import it and embed it within an individual page. That would be the second way. And sometimes that's worthwhile. But more often than not, you can link a style sheet to your page. And the advantages of doing that is that as I create additional pages, those pages will automatically inherit or adopt the styles that I have created. So I don't need to duplicate myself. And if you recall when we're working on lesson 2 when we were getting acquainted, or was it lesson 3 that we were getting acquainted with HTML and CSS, that the old school way of doing it is that you would have to change it line by line and page by page. Well, that can really be overwhelming, and it kind of sets yourself up for a lot of mistakes and a lot of extra work. So we're going to create our own style sheet, and we're going to link it, and it will automatically be saved inside our root folder. And that's what we want. If it's not inside your root folder, then when you upload it to your host, it's going to be looking for that file, and when it can't find it, then all of your pages will be visible, but none of the styling will be applied. It will be just default CSS or default HTML, one of the 2. Now, the way that this page can be named, you'll notice that they started with a lowercase and they didn't use a space between the words. They used an underscore. Again, another thing that would be acceptable is if you wanted to use camel casing, which is what I usually do. So I don't know, it's just a preference. You can do it whichever way you want. But by camel casing, I get that capital letter in there in the middle of it, and that helps visually break up the words. So it's up to you, whichever you feel most comfortable with, but I would get in the habit of doing it one way or another. Does that make sense to everybody? I hope. So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to click here. And you'll notice that we don't have anything yet. So this is where we need to select, the background, or we're going to select what we want to do here. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to add some background content here. So what I want to do in here, I don't want the container, I just want here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my own selector, and we need to use the book to get the syntax of this really, really accurate, okay? So the first thing that we want to do, and we're controlling these links, and an important page for you guys to look at are hyperlinks or pseudo classes. And so a default link is called an A link, and that's the first thing that will be created. Now, what you can also do is that when you have gone to a page and then you come back to the original page and you want to see a visited link, you can add that, and by doing so, it will create it. You can change the color of it or change its properties so that you can tell that you've already been to that particular page. Another one that's pretty common that we're going to apply in this particular group of styles is a hover, so that when you hover on top of any one of these links, that it changes its properties. The one that we got rid of originally over here for the home was an active link. That is a design choice, that when you're on a particular page, if you want that active link to look differently, then you can. And then the last one is an A focus. And the focus has to do with if you're using any of the keyboard strokes to control the links. So that's what that does. So if we go back again and we look at all sources and we select Bootstrap, we can look at all the original Bootstrap ones that we have here. If you select a current one and then you select current, it will show you if there is anything that has been altered to it over here. And the same with show set. That gets even more specific. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to go back to all. And then we're going to go back here and we're going to start to create our own nav here. We're going to change the background color of this. So it starts with, if I go back here, let's go back down here, and if I select this original div, now this one, let's click this one, not the container. Come on, div container. Well, I'm having trouble with that. So I'm going to move this. And what I want to do is I want to select this div right here where it's div row. So I want the background of this row to change. And so, which div you select is really, really important. So that's what I'm changing now. So what I want to do now, and I want to make sure that I have green styles selected, and you'll notice that we don't have any styles. With this selected, I'm going to go ahead and select plus. And you'll notice that it says container row. So it gives us a starting point. Well, I don't need the container. So I'm going to get rid of that. But I do need row. So I want it to be period or dot row, and then a space. And then I need dot nav bar. And it's really important that all of this is exactly as I'm writing this, default. Okay, so I want default. nav bar default. And now I hit the return key twice. Okay, and then I can click off of it and I have a new selector. And this is what you want to see. This is really, really important. That when I select that selector, you'll notice that the background of my nav bar highlights all the way across. That's a good sign. That means that when I apply a property to this particular selector, that it's going to affect the area that I want. If it doesn't highlight in blue, then there may be a syntax error or something. So for example, if I go ahead here and I come back here and let's double click to rename this, and I forget to put a space between these two. Okay, so I have .row.navbar -default. And I click on here. Notice that it's not highlighting in blue. So that's a syntax error. So this goes back to even in the days of early direct coding with HTML, that if you're off one character, sometimes things won't work. And this is a good example of that. And I can't do this too much because I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. I'll make a mistake myself. And I want to make sure that we get through this somewhat unscathed. Okay, double click. And now when I click on it, notice that it highlights in blue. Very, very important. Okay. So now what we want to do here is now we're going to look, and I want to make sure that all is selected up here, not show set, because we really haven't created anything yet. But with the CSS Designer, that we have all of these different properties that we can change up here. Okay, we can change the layout, we can edit text, we can change the borders, we can change the background, and we have other properties that we can change. Well, for right now, we're just going to change the background. Okay, so we could start by adding a background color if we wish. We can go ahead and then we can add a gradient on top of that if we wish. So I'm going to go ahead and, again, this is where you need to use the textbook for the colors that we'll be using. And then later on, after we finish the lessons, and you build your third website using the lessons as a template, you're going to go back into the CSS styles and change them to customize to get the look that and feel that you're wanting for your own personal website. So for right now, background color, and this is the default in the event that a browser, if someone views your page in a browser that does not recognize CSS3, and that is a strong possibility in areas that have old browsers, somebody that hasn't updated their browser in years, that if it doesn't support CSS3, then it wouldn't support gradients. And if it doesn't support a gradient, then you would just see the default background. And if you don't have one, it would be white. So I'm going to click here. And you can see I already have some that have been created here. So I guess that was from previous lessons. So I'm going to use a hexadecimal down here. Hexadecimal numbers are used for web safe colors. And there are a total, just to give you some idea that if you read chapter 10, web safe colors they harken back to the early days of web design when there was a distinct difference between Mac and PCs in the visibility, and there were only 216 colors common to both platforms. So if you wanted your website and you were using solid colors to look the same on both platforms, you needed to use the hexadecimal numbers, web safe. So the color that we're going to use is 069. And see, it's that dark blue right here that I believe I already have, but I'll go ahead and I'll add it anyway. And I already have it. And now I can go ahead and I can click off of it. And you'll notice that the background goes blue. That's what I want. Now, the type is a little bit hard to read. And when I hover over it, you notice that there is a hover effect that we're going to change in the later part of this lesson. So again, we want to dress this up a little bit. and this is also a part of CSS3, is that we want to add a background color, and then we're going to add, if we wanted to, we could add a background image. Well, we're going to start by adding the gradient. Okay, so if I click here, what I can do is I want to make sure that this is set to 180 degrees, and then I'm going to click the top color here. And I got to look to make sure I know which colors go where. We want the top color to be what we just used, which was 069. So that should be, let me switch to hexadecimal here. Nope, that's the wrong one. I want it to be, I can't, let's see. I'm just going to put it in here. And then that will end that. I want it to be 069, the top color. Okay. So that's the one that we have there. Then I'm going to click on the bottom color, and this one is the one that we want to be 08A, and you need the pound in front of it, or octothorpe, or whatever you want to call the thing. So 08A, and so these are all the call outs that are used for hexadecimal numbers. There is a chart of them, and you can, if you're using Illustrator or Photoshop, you can always select from web safe colors, and they will give you the numbers here to know that, you know, to be assured that it's identical. So I'm going to go ahead and add this as my gradient to my palette here, and I'm going to close it. And you can see it's a subtle little change here, a little subtle change in the gradient. So the next thing that we want to do is to kind of distinguish one link or one button from the next. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create another rule now that isolates each of these buttons so that we can define not only the hover state for the background, or the hover state, yeah, for the background so that it changes and we can see that, but we can also define the border. And if you recall, I said that using CSS box model, we can define each side of the border separately from the other. And that's what we're going to do here. And then that might be it for today. And then we'll continue another day. But so in order to continue with this, I need to select one of these buttons here, like so. And I'm going to go ahead and to do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add another rule. And you'll notice that it says that it's nav, .nav, nav bar, nav, list item A. And that's really what I want. Okay. So I hit the return key twice. Now I select this, you'll notice that all of these links that I have selected are highlighted. That's another good sign, so that what I have done is correct. Okie doke. So the next thing that we want to do is we need to define for those links the rules here that go around the borders. So what we want to do for the top, so by selecting this third button over here, I'm going to go ahead and I don't want, if I wanted the same to be, you know, the border to be the same all the way around, I would select the first one. But I'm selecting, you know, each one of these, the top, right, bottom, and left, to be different for each of these. So I'm going to come back in here. And the width of this, we want to be in pixels, and we want it to be 1 pixel. Okay, so I'm going to come in here, and that's it, just 1 pixel. Okay, the style is going to be solid. And you can see that there's a number of different styles to choose from, but I want it to be solid. And now we need to add the color. And so what we're going to do on the top, it wants us to be, to use pound or octothorpe. And we want it to be 0AE. Okay, we want it to be this light blue. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add that to my color palette. And I'm going to click in here, and there you have. Now, it's going to be really hard to see these along the top, but they have been added. And in a few minutes, you will see more. Now we want to do the right side. So the border to the right is going to be a little bit darker. And this is going to create the illusion of a light source coming from the upper left-hand side. And so it will create the illusion that this is actually a three-dimensional, but very shallow relief. So I'm going to go ahead and select the right one now and go through the same thing. I want the width to be 1 pixel. Come on, there we go. 1 pixel, and I hit the tab key to change that. Then I'm going to go ahead and I want it to be solid. And if you wanted them all to be different, you can make them all different. Now the color, again, is going to be a tricky one. We want it to be pound 037. So I want it to be pound 037, which is a dark blue. And I'll go ahead and I'll add that to my style as well. And now it's more visible. You see the dark blue that's appearing on the right. So we're going to use the same one for the bottom, and we're going to use the light one for the left side. And before you know it, they will be divided, equally divided, and they'll have a nice quality about them that looks a little bit richer than just leaving it kind of plain. I mean, I like the look of it. I think they did sort of a nice job with that. So let's do that again. We want 037 down here. So let me go to the color, and we want that. So I'm already using that one. Whoops, no, I wanted 037. That's this one. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the width. And pixels, I'm going to select 1 pixel. Tab key. And then I want it to be solid. There we go. Okay, so if you look carefully, you can see it down there. Now I need to change the left one. The width, again, is 1 pixel. So it's sort of, the initial setup of all of this is tedious. But remember, what you're doing for the first page will be applied to all the additional pages that you create. So the initial template that you create for yourself usually takes quite a bit of work. And remember, what we're doing already is we already had the Nav Bar pre-built for us by Bootstrap. So, imagine if you had to code all of this by hand. So there's that light color there. And there you go. So now they're distinguished from one another, and they look a little bit different, which is kind of nice. Okie doke. So now what we want to do, let's see if we have some time. I don't know. Well, do we have time, guys? I have a question by Carlos. He wants to talk after class. That's good. Okay. Is this making sense to you? There's a couple of things that I should probably point out that the book pointed out that I kind of glanced over. But for example, with we have here green travel. What if I were to take out this octothorpe or pound sign here and come back and look at that? Notice that this is no longer behaving like the others. It doesn't have that hover effect. And I don't want to do that. So sometimes when you add links and you don't put the href and you don't add the pound sign, then it doesn't recognize it as a pseudo selector, or it doesn't recognize it as a link. Now, let me go back in here. See, it doesn't take much for me to screw things up. So let me undo that a couple of steps. There we go. There we go. Just make sure that it's not, none of them are selected, and then it goes back to the way it was. And then when you hover over it, that's what you should get. And you should get the little, the illusion that you have, you know, especially with the light blue against the dark. And it will be more pronounced when we add more content to this, that the buttons actually look, you know, very subtle, but kind of three-dimensional. So the next thing that I probably want to do is I want to make sure that I save. And this is also a tricky part. If I just hit Command S for save, it will save the page. But again, because I want to be able to go back to various stages, I'm going to save this as version 2. Normally you don't have to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to put underscore and put 02. So this is my second version. And it saved the page. But you'll notice something, okay, down here in this row. Okay, if you look at the top row, these are the pages that are open. And when you see an asterisk, then that means that that page has not been saved. But you'll also notice down here, we have source code that we can look at. We can look at Bootstrap CSS. That's what's down here. We can look at green style CSS, and these are the styles that we're adding now. We can look at jQuery, and we can see that down here, and all the code that's associated with that. So if you know how to use JavaScript, you can you know, affect that. And here's some more Bootstrap JavaScript down here. Notice the green style CSS, and notice that there's a little asterisk after it. That means that the styles have not been saved. So the page has been saved, but the styles have not. So what I need to do, anytime I have made changes to CSS, as well as to the rest of the page, you know, changing the HTML. The HTML is saved when I save the page, but not the CSS style sheet. So when I want to make sure that both have been saved, I always go to File, and I say Save All. And now you'll notice that that has been updated and saved. Okie doke. So we have a little bit more time. And this would be adding styling to the background for A links and A visited. So that we're gonna, when we create a new style, we can copy this. This applies to the A link, but we also want it applied to when we click on it and when we have visited, and then when we're going to do hover. So that might be better left for next Tuesday, I guess. So it's quite a bit. It will take me more than just 5 or 10 minutes to do this. So are we good so far? Is it tedious? You betcha. And can it be frustrating? Yep, it can be very frustrating, especially if you use the wrong syntax or you make a slight mistake. We only have 2 rules, but you can see that if you look at some of the finished files and some of the later exercises, it's just the starting point. There are tons and tons of styles that can be added. And especially then when you get into media queries, that can be other things. You know, how many sizes do you need to adjust for? That can also be kind of overwhelming and daunting. But the nice thing is that when you're done with all of this, you can always link this style sheet to another. And if you just want to change colors and you want to change, you know, certain basic properties, it won't take you long to do that. And then you're kind of set to go. So it's really important, and I think I'm sure some of you in the future will be wanting to create your own website in the future, or you're going to use a Bootstrap template, a template that you've downloaded from a website, and you're going to want to customize it, and you're going to be able to do that, understanding how all of this works. And then I have made sure that I have saved all these files for myself so that if I go back and I forget things all the time, you know, you have to go back and review, and this helps me an awful lot. I have another question. It says, when I open the file for lesson 6, it doesn't show a preview on Dreamweaver. It shows code. Then look at the top. If you're looking at code view, then that's what you're seeing. And then at the top, if I want to select split view, then that's what I see now. And then you click here. Did you open that file? Did you open in split view? If I switch to files, the opening file here is mylayout.html. Is that what you have open? Yeah. Make sure that you have, that's what you have open. See, mine just popped up. You know, here's my layout file. If I double click on that, that's what I should see. If I double click on the first one that I did, when I just changed, you know, added the nav bar, then that's what I should see. Then I saved it again with the changes to CSS, and that's what I should see. Do you have the right file open? Did you open their basic file? And are you trying to make the same edits and changes that I have made right now? And it's not showing it? What do you, if you're in split view, you're not seeing anything in the top here? Nothing? David? Hello? When you say no, what do you mean no? Here, let me check here. Let's look in participants. I'm going to let you speak so I can hear you. Can you talk, David?
Hello.
Yeah, so you don't, when you open the initial file, you didn't see this?
No.
You didn't?
No, I'm in split view too.
I can't, wait, I'm having a hard time hearing you. Speak up a little bit.
No, when I open the file, I'm on split view, but it just shows the code in the bottom, but I don't have a preview.
And you open mylayout.html.
Yeah, from the Google Drive, lesson 6.
Okay, then possibly, okay, let's check the other thing. And this could be a problem with the rest of you. Let's go to site, and let's go to manage sites. Did you create a site for yourself?
No, I don't think so.
Then you need to go back and do that.
Okay.
So that you need to establish a root folder, and that's why it's not showing up possibly.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So go back and establish a site for yourself, and then just use that site, same site for every lesson. But on every lesson, you're going to update the root folder to the new lesson, the link to it.
Okay.
So that's a good point, though, and that's an important thing for everybody to take note of. That anytime you're working on these lessons, you have to establish a root folder. You have to manage a site. So you'll notice that I have a bunch of sites that I manage here. But you will only have one at the moment. So when I'm done with this, this is what everybody has to do. You have to do this to work on this. You have to go to site, and you're going to select new site, and you're going to name it. So I'll just name it test site. This can be named anything. Okay? And then you need to link it to a folder. And the folder that you're going to link it to is the whatever lesson we're working on. This is going to become your root folder. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to choose lesson 6. That's what I'm working on. And then under advanced settings, under local info, for the folder up here, I need to link within lesson 6, I need to link to this image folder. And then I click OK. And I click OK. Now it's going to give me an error because I'm using it for another website. And now with that site selected, everything should be visible. There's my test site. But I'm going to go back and I'm going to get rid of mine. So I'm going to go back to Site, Manage Sites. And I'm going to take that test site and I'm going to remove it because it's conflicting with my other one. Now there's some other things that we could go over too right now. If everybody has a moment before you log off, is that one of the things that you should do is that you should export. So here's the site that I use for this class. I want to export the information for that. And from time to time, you'll need to update it. Okay. So what I can do is I can always click on this button right here and I can export it. Okay. And I'm going to click here. And, where do I want to put it? I'm just going to put it in the folder that's Dreamweaver lesson, or make sure that you've copied all of the lessons, but I'm putting it in mine. It says Dreamweaver CC 2017 lesson files. That's where I'm putting it in mine. And what this will do is it will save it as an STE file, okay, or site file. So I'll go ahead and I'll save that. So that's been exported and I'm done. Why is that important? That when you come back in the next time, and this has been true when you're working at school, is that when you shut down the computers and they're reset, every time you restart the computer that you have to start from scratch. Well, I don't want to do that. So what I can do is I can go to Site and I can go to Manage Sites. And I'm going to take this one right here and I'm going to delete it. And so what if you accidentally delete it? And you go, oh, shoot, I got to go through all that again and I need to update everything. Well, I can also import a site. And that's what I want to select this button for here. I can click this and you can see here's that STE file that I just created inside the Dreamweaver lesson folder. And I can click open and I'm set to go. Now when I go back here and I can look at local files and I'm set to go here. So covering a couple of other things, I have used up all of your time and I appreciate you guys hanging in there. So what I want to do now is I'm going to pause. If anybody has any questions, hang around. I'm going to pause the recording and then Carlos, you have a question for me or questions and I can talk to you. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to pause.